That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Fall, the third film directed by Scott Mann, which Lionsgate is releasing August 12th, 2022.
What are Scott's other two movies?
Two things I haven't seen called Heist and Final Score they kind of have that nondescript Z-grade action film vibe that trots out names like Robert De Niro and Pierce Brosnan. And this is notably from the producers of 47 Meters Down, one of your favorites.
I love that movie. So this movie is similar in that it's one of those isolation thrillers.
Survival adventure
Survival,
films.
yeah. Mm-hmm. And this film did what it needed to do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it had me on the edge of my seat. So in that regard, it's a thumbs up.
Yeah, it's very anxiety-inducing.
Yeah. The basic story is we focus on two young ladies, Becky, played by...
Grace Carolyn Currey from Shazam.
Oh, and Hunter.
Virginia Gardner, who is in the 2018 Halloween film.
So Becky and Hunter are best friends. The opening of the film is Becky, Hunter, and Becky's husband, who looks like the guy from... he reminded me of someone.
He's played by Mason Gooding, who's in the latest Scream film.
Oh.
Which you didn't see.
But he looks like the guy from the sitcom Special, that Netflix series. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's Tales of the City or...
Oh, yeah, you're thinking of... I think his name's like Charlie... Is it Burnett or something? But
anyhow, the opening of the film is those three. So Becky, Hunter, and Becky's husband are rock climbing, and Becky's husband falls to his death. Like, she watches him fall and die. So 51 weeks later, because it can't be a full year, we see that she is, still grief-stricken, a shell of her former self. We get an interaction with her and her dad, played by...
Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Who's being very assertive with her about how she needs to move on, like build a bridge and get over it. But it's her best friend Hunter who sort of pulls her out of her shell and says, like, girl, let's go do some dumb shit. And they decide to go climb this 2,000-foot tall tower somewhere in the desert.
Mm-hmm. The B-67 TV tower.
Child, when we saw that tower, I was like, my blood pressure went up. I was sweating. It's just insane. These two dummies climb that tower and they get stuck because the ladder that leads up to the very top with this platform that's the size of like a large ass pizza box.
That's what she describes it as.
Yeah.
For most of the journey, they're in guarded by kind of a metal cage, and I think it's the last 200 feet that they're naked to the elements with just this ladder. So it's been more exposed to the elements.
It had me stressed out.
Yes.
But they get stuck up there because the ladder that led up to what you just described falls. Like, it's all rickety and rusty and the screws are falling off. So they're stuck up there. So what do they have? They have 2 cell phones and a drone. Mm-hmm. So, of course, they try to call for help, but they get no service. But they realized that when they got service at some point on this tower because they had filmed something on Instagram, and then they see that it actually posted.
Because Hunter's a YouTube star.
Yeah, Hunter's like famous on social media.
So that's why she has the drone to also document this journey.
Right. So Hunter thinks, well, if I can get lower, maybe we can get service. So they have like the ropes like they use for climbing rocks, and she suspends herself down. She almost falls, but she suspends herself and realizes I don't have service. So she climbs her ass back up there, and they try to figure out another plan, which includes like using the drone, which doesn't really work. We can get into the specifics, but a turning point in the film is that it's been like 3 days, and like they are dehydrated. They're a wreck. Vultures are trying to get their asses. We find out, so spoiler, that earlier in the film, when Hunter tried to suspend herself to use her cell phone and she almost fell, she actually did fall and died. She hit like a internet...
It looks like a satellite dish.
Yeah, it looks like a satellite dish.
But she was able to get the backpack with the drone and the water up to Becky.
Right. So at that point, Becky's been up there for 3 days, and she's like hallucinating because she's dehydrated and hungry and like, probably suffering from sun poisoning. She realizes that her friend died like 2 days ago. So there's a scene where like a vulture's trying to attack her. She eats the vulture, kind of gets some energy, and then she realizes like, I can do this. So something they tried to do early on in the story is they think, well, since we couldn't get low enough to use our cell phone, what if we put what if we drop our cell phone? And they're like, well, we need to pad it. So they put the cell phone in one of Hunter's shoes and like stuff it with like her bra. They drop it and clearly that didn't work. Like the phone didn't survive the impact. But Becky's able to get down to Hunter, who's on this satellite dish looking thing dead. Mm-hmm. And she decides to put her cell phone in Hunter's other shoe.
And then stuff it in her abdomen where there's a laceration from the vulture.
And stuff that shoe in her friend's abdomen and pushes her off. And that does allow the cell phone to survive. It gets service, sends out the messages she had created for help, and then she's saved.
And you're also forgetting the friction between the two women.
So there are a few things we need to know. One, there is a point in the story where they see a guy like out by the tower, like looking around
With a dog.
and they throw shit at him and it doesn't get his attention. They set off a flare and he notices. So great, they're saved, but not really because it's only like 30 minutes into the film. That man, he has like an RV parked nearby and they see him because they have binoculars. Go to the RV. There's another man in there. They notice that these girls are up there because they're waving and flashing. Those two men go and steal their car because the two had driven to the tower. So of course they're not helping them. They also use the drone. The first time the battery almost dies, so they have to retreat, but they figure out a way to charge the drone in the tower.
At the very tippy top.
Yeah, which is a good scene.
That's a really good scene because she has to sit there and clutch it till all 4 bars, like against her chest,
full charge,
while she's wrapped
and
around this pole.
yeah, it's a good scene. Mm-hmm. But so they are successfully able to get the drone down to like a nearby hotel, but then like a big rig truck runs it over. Mm-hmm. But probably the most important thing is before Hunter dies from the fall, she decides to confess to her friend that she had an affair with her now dead husband. So there's a lot of friction between them, which we come to find out is all in her head because her friend died. But
not before the confession.
Not before the confession, but afterwards we see there's contention and animosity, but it's all in her head. So the movie's like almost like an hour 50. So at first I was worried, like, oh God, it's going to be languid, like that film with Zac Efron and the Gold. What's it called?
Gold.
Oh. That felt tedious because it's like there's not much happening. It's just like long stretches of dirt and heat. But in this one, yeah, it kept my attention. There's enough going on, albeit some corny scenes.
So it's written by Scott Mann and a man named Jonathan Frank. And yeah, you have to initially get over that white people doing really dumb things and putting themselves in precarious situations that are very unnecessary. So you have to
I'm not going to say that, but you can.
It's true. You have to get over that part. And again, some rocky, little corny dialogue that I think that both the lead actors do end up kind of overcoming. And I think they do both give really great performances.
I agree with you.
You become invested in it.
Yeah. Hunter to me came across, which I think initially it was corny, but then she kind of reminds me of like one of those like Daily Burn or Peloton trainers, like trying to motivate her friend, which initially was annoying, but I think ultimately it works.
Well, I think that makes sense for what they're going for because she has this YouTube persona, and also as a big secret she has to keep from her friend. But they bring it up because I think Becky says to her at one point, like, why don't you just be yourself? Because it's like clearly you're being fake.
Yeah, the first 15 minutes were rough because I'm like, oh God, it's going to be like, is this movie going to be this stupid and corny? But then, yeah, it definitely picks up. So I thought Becky's dad, what's his name again?
Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who was in one of Scott Mann's previous films, Heist, I think.
He doesn't have much to do, but the interaction we do see with him and his daughter initially, he's being very like aggressive with her and he says like, you need to move on, and she's like, I don't want to move on. So my initial impression of Becky was like, ugh. And then the dad he's trying to tell her like, do you think if the tables were turned that your husband would be grieving this way for you? Do you think he'd be drowning himself in booze, grief, and sorrow?
Yeah, I wrote that down.
Like, God, you're not being very sensitive.
No.
There's another scene, I forget who says it, where they say, don't die. Oh,
It's Hunter.
Hunter, yeah. Again, the first like 15, 20 minutes, the dialogue had me very concerned because Hunter's trying to tell Becky, like,
Face the fear.
yeah, face the fear. And what did your husband used to say? Something like, don't die if you want to live, or keep living if you're dying. I'm like, who wrote this?
Jonathan Frank and Scott Mann.
But, yeah, after we get over that, so before they get to the tower, they drive to this desert town and they stop at a diner. And I think that's where things pick up because they're being a little obnoxious and there's this woman serving them and they're asking, like, can we charge our phone?
She goes, power's not free.
She's like, power's not free, no. So then Hunter demonstrates that you can charge your phone by plugging it into, like, a lamp if you remove the bulb. So of course, like, oh well, that's gonna happen later in the film.
Like everything, like we also see Becky looking at footage of her and her husband, and then there's an aside with Hunter, and you can see her like pause on Hunter's face, and it's like, oh, she thinks there's something going on, but like every little detail, of course, is recycled again. It's one of those. But
And then the tension starts pretty quickly because when they leave the diner to head to the tower, Hunter's trying to document it on like IG Live, so she's not paying attention to the road and they almost get T-boned. That was a good start because then we pull up to this damn tower and then we look up at it. I think the cinematography does a good job of like satisfying like the visuals to make someone like me who'd be afraid of heights anxious. Yeah, it was
it was
effective.
shot by a man named MacGregor, who was the cinematographer on Vivarium. But yeah, and also notably, as they walk up to this tower, there's these vultures tearing apart this animal, and Becky is so upset and tries to stop them because the animal is still alive, and she calls them pricks. And then ultimately, she becomes
prey.
A predator as well because she does what she has to do to survive.
Yeah. But yeah, once they start climbing that tower, oh my God, I was so tense because it's just like, this is not a good idea. There are scenes of Hunter hanging from the tower.
Oh yeah, once they get to the platform, Hunter, who is so ballsy, like leans herself over and is dangling, and then she makes Becky do it, like, the fear, you're never gonna get over the fear unless you do this. It's like, oh, this is so stupid. but the intention is to get you going.
Yeah, and it works. There's a scene where Becky has to pee and she's peeing off the tower.
Yeah.
I thought that was good. There was one thing about Hunter that annoyed me a lot is when she's climbing, she has a backpack and she doesn't she carries the backpack like a high school student who's trying to be cool, like hanging off one shoulder. Like, bitch, you better wear this backpack right. Like,
even when she has to retrieve the backpack because it's fallen on those satellite dish things, it's like, could you just put it on both your shoulders? Yeah,
there's a scene where Becky's having like a nightmare that Hunter's being eaten by vultures, which once we realize that is actually what happened, I thought that was...
It's doing all those same things, but at least effectively enough to get the response, to have the investment and response that it's going for.
Something else that had my anxiety so high is, like we mentioned, they're standing on this platform, open to the air, open to the elements. There's nothing holding them to this platform. And Hunter in particular is just standing there like she's standing on the corner. Like, a slight gust of wind would have knocked her ass over. That shit had me so tense. That's all I have, actually. The story's pretty simple, but there's enough in it that I think it justifies the hour 48-minute runtime. I would watch it again with people, just because there were so many like WTF moments.
It's effective, much like 47 Meters Down.
Yeah,
it has all of those right elements there. And I actually really liked the song that closes out the film.
Oh, yeah, you looked it up. And it's by someone you recognize.
Madison Beer.
Who was a judge or a contestant?
She was a judge on, I think, Celebrity Drag Race. And I remember thinking, like, oh, she's very beautiful.
She is beautiful.
And I of course, that didn't make me look up any catalog of her music. But this was a very effective music. It gave me I think it's called I Have Never Felt More Alive. And it's a little corny, but it reminded me of that Alanis Morissette song at the end of City of Angels.
Oh, God.
The same kind of evocative feeling. But Uninvited, was that? Anyway.
What would you give this film?
3 out of 5.
I would give it 3 out of 5 as well. I thought it was good. Anything else? Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.